The opponents of taking down Confederate symbols claim that we're trying to erase history. Actually, they are trying to erase history, and the presence of Confederate memorials across the United States at all represents a propaganda campaign that was begun after the Civil War to erase history, to erase the history of slavery, and to erase the true meaning of the Civil War as a struggle between slavery and freedom. So we certainly are concerned about this ongoing propaganda campaign that began centuries ago to rewrite history, and progress has slowed. But it hasn't stopped, and we're seeing still more coming down than going up. And, I just like to think of this movement as not just something that began in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, not just something that began in 2015 when the Southern Poverty Law Center started tracking Confederate memorials, but actually a movement that began in the 19th century when Confederate memorials started going up.
Alrighty, welcome in. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
Man, I'm feeling good, man. Feeling good. It's the midweek. And, we record on Wednesdays. It's the midweek and only have a few more miles to go until the weekend. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
This is getting into my time of year. I've already been to the beach once. The temperature is hot. When you step outside, you're almost to the point where you start sweating when you step outside and do nothing. And I love that so much. People think I'm being sarcastic or funny about that, but no, I do. I absolutely do. It's my time of year. This is when I've been running. I ran yesterday and the day before in the middle of the afternoon. Oh, so nice. It was so great. Just get out.
But before we go to
Sure.
to our talk about our fine sponsors,
Hmm?
how was the beach? Wasn't it cold? Or
No.
wasn't the water
beach was
too
great.
cold? Oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
well,
Okay.
I will say, all right, so we go to this is our basic setup. Every year, my wife has a conference at Perdido Beach Resort. It's always fantastic. We really, really like it a lot. And so she goes down early in the week. I single dad it for a couple of days here at the house with me and the little one, and then me and her load up and head down. So we did that. Left after school, I think Wednesday. Wednesday of last week. Headed down. Stopped and stayed overnight and around Montgomery, and then headed the rest of the way on Thursday morning after I recorded the TV show from the hotel and all that. So just so everybody knows my complete schedule for no reason whatsoever. But anyway, so we go down and then we stay through the weekend. And we've been doing this for the last 4 years, I think 4 or 5 years. And so it is, this year was by far the warmest that we have had. I will say the one complaint I have about Perdido is that is the coldest damn pool I have ever stuck my toe into in my life. That
the
is
pool
some
is
ice
cold.
water in that thing.
Okay.
And it is off the charts cold in that thing. But this time not as bad. I was actually able to get in it. Of course, kids like, oh, come, it's fine. The water's okay. You just gotta, and they're liars. Little children are such liars. So yeah, but no, it was a really good time. We had a lot of fun, and it's great. The beach down there, really like it a lot. I don't get into the Gulf a lot. There's too much stuff going on in the Gulf for me.
Hey, man, I'm with you on that, brother.
We take another trip in July over to Ponce Inlet, which is just south of Daytona, and stay. And I'll get into the end of the Atlantic. All right, because it's not nearly the same. Because there just seems to be a concentration of shark and jellyfish in the Gulf that just I'm not into that.
Yep.
So. But yeah, man, no, it was great. Really, really enjoyed it a lot. So
Good.
yeah.
Good.
We were going to stop, and we just couldn't make it to the resorts for the Wind Creek Casino resorts. We were going to do that. We thought about trying to make it down to Atmore, but by the time we got out of here, it was just going to be too far for us to go that night. And then Wetumpka was off a little ways, and so we just decided to stay at a regular little Marriott property over there in Prattville. And so, but I can tell you this: if you have the opportunity and you're a little better planner than I, you should absolutely do that because it's a fantastic stay. It really is. You go, you play the games, you have the great food. You can go to the spa. You break up your little trip to the beach. That's fantastic. It's a great place to go and stay. There are our sponsors here, Wind Creek Entertainment. We really appreciate them. It is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment, and we so appreciate what they do and helping out with the podcast and supporting us and supporting the fact that you get to hear a lot of voices that you don't ordinarily hear on any other show in this state, and get to hear a lot of voices and a lot of opinions and things that you would never hear otherwise. So we really do appreciate them. Check them out at Wind Creek Entertainment online, and book a stay. You will not regret it. I promise you. All right. So we're gonna play our version of One Angry Man here, where so the 12 Angry Men. David's gonna be the jury, and we're gonna I'm gonna present a case of Tommy Tuberville's residency issues here. We were talking before we came on about a story that was in the Alabama Daily News, written by Mary Sales and someone else. There's a reporter there. I'm drawing a blank on his name. I think Alex something.
I'll tell you that in a second. Yeah.
Anyways, it's a story about Tuberville.
Alex Angle.
And it's a story about Tuberville's homestead exemption that he has on his house in Auburn. That he's apparently had a homestead exemption on his house for several years. I want to just say right off the bat that sentence is false. Okay. Because Tommy Tuberville.
Just to be clear, because you said several years, they're saying specifically since 2018. So you're saying that's false.
I'm saying that Tommy Tuberville has not had a homestead exemption on that house.
But the homestead exemption has been there.
The homestead exemption has been there.
Okay, go ahead. I know what your argument is now. Go ahead, make your argument.
Well, I'm not. This is not the whole thing now. This is. I know for this particular point. Tommy Tuberville does not own this home. His wife and child own this home. Tucker Tuberville, who
you're saying still to this day.
He is, as of right now, according to Lee County tax records, he has petitioned Lee County to become the homeowner next year on the tax records. So he and his wife will become the official homeowners next year of that house. So he still does not own that home at this particular point.
So now let me just say this.
Mm-hmm.
So what you just said is disputed by this story. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying this story says that while the home was purchased in the name of the senator's wife and son, they say his name was recently added and his son's was removed.
His name will be added in the next property tax year. But at this point, really, that's really splitting hairs over something that doesn't make much sense. I mean, because we're talking about the 7-year deal here, so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Now, there's also an argument in that story about from Tuberville, and that's not Mary Sales or Alex Angle, that the 7 years can be any 7 years. That is complete and utter bullshit. Okay. Just read the Constitution, I believe. Let's see. Let me pull up the exact wording that we talked about here earlier. Let's see, so I can make sure that I have the exact.
So while you're doing that, I just want to read what the story says here about that point, just to set you up, to tee you up here. So they quote Tuberville saying, you can go back to as long as you've had a 7-year. I was at Auburn 10 years, so I lived there for 10 years in a row. So it's not your last 7 years. Then the story, not quoting Tuberville now, but the story says, there's no definition of residency in state law as it applies to gubernatorial candidates. Residency is first a question for political parties who qualify candidates for the ballot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, let me just say, those are two separate things. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right.
So, one, the 7 year thing, all right, there absolutely 1000% is, and this is the quote from the Alabama Constitution.
All right.
Those who serve as governor must be, quote, resident citizens of this state at least 7 years next before the date of their election. All right. There's not a court in this world that will not determine that sentence right there, next before their election, is the 7 years exactly
So
previous to that election date.
your argument hangs on the word next.
Well, next before the date of. Next
Well,
before
if
the
they
date
said
of their
if they
election.
said well, if you took the word next out, and if it just said 7 years before, I think that could be interpreted very broadly. But you're honing in on, and I'm not disagreeing with you. You're honing in on the word next, I think, as being the pivotal word there.
Yeah, and I mean,
Mhm.
I believe that you will find that there is some case law that would support the fact that you have to
Mhm.
be in the immediate 7 years prior to that.
Mhm.
And I'm and this is will probably have nothing to do with governor, or that there will be a case, or several cases down there where that exact language has been used in a auditor or a city council person or whatever, whatever the residency requirement has been, for this job, for an elected official's job, and that's what will have been determined. I mean, and because you know what, of course it is. I mean, you know what I'm saying. You couldn't have lived here for 7 years when you. I mean, think about how ridiculous that is. Let's say you were born here. Let's say you were born here 60 years ago, and you lived here for the first 7 years of your life, and then moved away to France, and then you came back to run for whatever. I mean, come on, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it would
Who
feel
doesn't think that?
ludicrous. Yeah.
Yeah, of course it's
Yeah.
ludicrous.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, okay, and this is where I think we get into kind of the crux of the argument and the problems for Tommy Tuberville, and it's this: he can't prove he lives in that house, and and no one with a working brain thinks that he actually lives in that house. All right, there's just, I mean, it's a 1,500 square foot house in the middle of a subdivision in Auburn, that is valued at about 350 grand. And I mean, that's a nice house. I'm not, dogging it or whatever. This is a multimillionaire who has a $6 million home at the beach that he lives in. All of his travel records, everything that you can look at, points to the fact that he lives there, at the beach house. Nothing points to the fact that he goes and comes to and leaves from Auburn to when he leaves the Senate and comes home, quote unquote. Nothing points to that. Trust me, I've reported on all of this stuff. I've talked about it in a column this week. Bill Britt has written several stories about some stuff. We've looked through all of the travel records and things. I have seen where he takes a plane from DC to Atlanta, and then his travel stops. There is no other charge for travel from Atlanta. Then several days later, he takes a plane from Destin or Fort Walton or Panama City Beach back to DC. And the reason that happens is because when you travel back to DC, as was, I guess, adjudicated by Ron Johnson a few years ago, that is determined official business, official Senate business, and therefore they can charge those plane flights from anywhere to their Senate office. They can't do that. You can only charge when you're leaving DC and coming home. You can only charge on the flights in which you are legitimately traveling to come to your home state, your home district, whatever. So he travels to Atlanta and charges that to the Senate office. Then we will also find in his PACs, the various political action committees in which he is associated, there are other travel records which have plane tickets that are suspiciously around these dates in which he has flown into Atlanta and there's no other travel. And then there's also about 10 grand worth of them charges to a taxi service, 30A taxi and shuttle, that's taking him from the airports to his house. And so all of that together, you add it, because this is what will happen, and we know this is what will happen because we just went through this with one David Cole. All right, and it's the exact same process. Okay. Someone will file a challenge to this. It will go into the courts. The court will manage this thing, and the courts will start to allow for the subpoena of records. They'll start to allow for depositions. All right. And they'll put Tommy Tuberville on the stand, and under oath, he'll have to start swearing to a whole bunch of stuff about where he sleeps at night, how many nights he's ever stayed at that house in Auburn, how many nights per week he stays at the house in Florida, where these documents come from. All of these different things are going to come into the record. And if he starts lying about some of these things, then they'll start going around and getting neighbors and other people around and also depose them and present this evidence. And what will ultimately come out of this thing is a record that shows that man don't live in Auburn. He lives at that beach house in Florida.
Okay, so I think we jumped ahead a little bit. And
Okay.
let me tell you why I'm saying that. So we know, first of all, that the residency question, at least initially, is an internal party consideration. So the Republican Party will be the one that will determine whether or not Tuberville has residency. So you're saying, now, if the Republican Party determines that he has residency, then what will happen is you believe that the Democratic Party or some other entities will file lawsuits. What will
happen first is, all right, so they'll if the Republican Party, this is where they have their ability. They can certify whoever they want to on their ballots. Okay. Now, I would not doubt that there would be a ballot challenge filed by somebody in the Republican Party.
Starting in the Republican Party.
Right,
Okay.
but they'll hold that internally. Okay. This will not be a court situation. All right. At that point. And so then after that, let's say he does this, he wins the GOP primary. Then once it comes to the general, that's when Democrats can start challenging this thing. Okay. But I'm almost confident.
Right.
I'm almost confident they have to wait until he has won.
Okay. So once he's won, assuming he wins the primary, you're saying that you believe that the Democratic Party and or other entities will file
No, I think they have to wait until after the general election.
Yeah, I thought that's what I said.
No, you said after the primary. So after the primary, after he wins the primary and they go into the general, and so he faces whatever Democratic candidate, I believe they have to wait until after that general election has run.
After it is. Oh, okay. So assuming he wins, which everybody assumes he would, then, or most people assume he would, then he will. You're saying that's when you think the courts will be brought into this.
Yes. Yeah. That's what happened with Cole up here. That's, the residency thing had to be challenged at a certain point after X, Y, and Z. And so I think at that point, that's when the challenge starts. And, I don't know.
Let me just ask you this. So you think that because I'm sure that this will be a really brutal fight at this particular juncture. It's not unreasonable to think that it could end up either way in front of the Alabama Supreme Court, right?
Sure. Yes.
Do you think the Alabama Supreme Court, as it is currently constituted, is going to rule against a Tuberville governorship?
Well, all right. So I think that you're going to have to get into with that specific questions of law. And I think where they have a real problem is we just did this with David Cole. And so you have really, really, really fresh precedent with this.
That's a good point.
And so you have some things, because that case traveled up and back to the Supreme Court 3 or 4 times, on different questions of things. Now I'll say that case was not ultimately, determined, whether his residency issue was not ultimately determined, because the AG's office stepped in and decided to prosecute him after the deposition, which also then brings up another point in this thing, which is Tommy Tuberville has used that home in Auburn as his place of residence in terms of voting absentee.
Okay.
So if he
fraud,
doesn't
voter
live,
fraud.
if he doesn't live in that house, that also could constitute voter fraud. So, I just, and people get confused and say, well, how is it that he could be the senator from the state of Alabama? And, and nobody's challenging that. It's a different set of rules. You have to be there one day to be the senator. You have to be there 7 consecutive years to be the governor. And, it's such a, honestly, as I said in the column, it's really ludicrous that this man is trying to convince us that he lives in this house. I mean, it just is. I mean, it just, when you look at all of the documents and all of the records, he cannot prove that he lives in this house. He can't do it. He can't do it. And the fact that he's had a homestead exemption on there, that's just one little piece of it. And it's kind of the same way, Kyle Whitmire, our friend that's written a lot of stuff, and we've had him on here before. He wrote the other day, if you just show me your income tax records, I'll be satisfied.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought that was a good argument as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a good argument. If he hasn't filed them, then that's, he's got a hell of a problem. But even if he has, that doesn't prove that he lives in that house. Residency is a whole different issue out of this thing. And there are a number of questions. And as we talked about with Barry.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I think what I read Whitmire's column, and I thought what he was saying was that filing state income tax in Alabama would prove that he was an Alabama resident, even if it wasn't in that house. It would still prove he was a resident. But are you saying that's not the case?
No, that's not the case. No, that's not, because residency, like I said, courts have determined that residency lies on a number of different factors, and that includes where a person lays his head, where the majority of his possessions reside, where he comes and goes to when he's leaving work, traveling to and from things. In other words, where is his base? Where is his home? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what courts look at. And there are a number of different things that they look at. Yes, tax records are one thing that they do consider at times. I mean, I'll say this: if Tommy Tuberville hasn't filed taxes in this state, then he's got himself another problem. And so
if he's asserting that he lives here,
if he's asserting that he lives here, yes. So you can't have it both ways. And so, but that does not by itself, the fact that he's filed taxes here, it does not prove that he's a resident of the state of Alabama. It proves that he has paid taxes in this state, and that he owns a home here or whatever. But it would be evidence that he could use to support his claim that he lives here. It's a little bit curious that in all of the talking, he never says that I paid state income taxes here for the last however many years.
And that's a good point too.
It's a little curious.
So let's play this out just a little bit more before we run out of time here for this segment. So he, all of these arguments that you're making and that Whitmire and others are making, it seems to me make a lot of sense. Is it that his team is so incompetent that they haven't played all this out? Or is there, what do you think is really going on? Why is he dangling this possibility in front of us if the likelihood is he's not going to prevail?
I think that there are a couple of different things. Well, number one, I think there's some arrogance involved in this, in that they believe, number one, they've probably had some assurances from the Republican Party that they're going to certify him no matter what. And then they, in terms of the legal aspects, they believe that they can probably run this thing out and that they'll get some support from the Republican appointed judges and not allow a Democrat to become the governor of the state of Alabama behind a residency issue. Now, I think that all that plays into this. But also, you go back to David Colt, okay? And because I keep coming back to this, because one question that I've had for this entire thing, because I essentially busted Cole for not living here. I had the records and started writing about this thing long before it ever went into court. And the one thing that I could never wrap my head around, and one of the things I tried to ask him was, why didn't you just drop out? I mean, if you just dropped out, none of this would have happened. You knew it. You knew that. I mean, he went into a deposition, and the guy asked him how many times he had stayed in that house, and he said never. And so,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean,
right.
I mean, it was just insanity to me, to watch this man completely. I mean, he imploded his entire life over this stupid lie. He could have just bowed out and was like, you know what? Okay, I'm out. And he chose to do this instead. And I mean, maybe he didn't see the AG's office coming in and prosecuting him for voter fraud. I could give you that. But I mean, at the end of the day, there was a challenge when he first started. Everybody was talking and knew that dude didn't live in that house, and all along I was just like, all you had to do was resign. All you ever had to do was resign. If you never got to that deposition, no one would have prosecuted you for anything.
So it sounds like it comes back to the question of just sort of arrogance and hubris, thinking that nobody's going to challenge me. Or if somebody challenges me, I'll get away. That's what happens. Well, the system is rigged in my favor.
Yeah, and with Tuberville, he's gotten away with it for the last several years. He doesn't live here. And he doesn't. And I mean, we're also at this point in American politics where very little matters anymore, the lying and all the stuff, it doesn't really matter at all. So, I just think that he's got a big problem. I think it's going to be a legal issue. I think it's going to be something that is going to be bigger than they think it is. And I think that we're going to be looking at this thing years from now. If he decides to run, I am still not convinced he's going to run. I'm really not. I'm really not convinced.
So maybe he uses his trip. I think later this week, he's supposed to be, well, by the time the podcast drops, he will have already gone down to UA with President Trump. He claimed he was going to talk to Trump on the way down about whether or not he should run. And basically get Trump's blessing to run if he decides to run. So maybe he's going to use that as his escape hatch. Maybe that's how he'll get out of this.
Maybe so. I'll tell you this. Let me make this guarantee to you. Okay.
All right.
If Will Ainsworth calls that man Tommy Tuberville and says, "Listen, Coach, I've thought it over. I've talked to everybody. I'm going to run. I'm going to run. I'm going to run hard. We're going to have a good race. We're going to fight this thing to the end. I'm going to put some money into this thing. We're going to go all out. May the best man win. I wish you luck. Hopefully we'll be friends at the end of this thing, but maybe we won't. I don't, but we're going to run hard and we're going to do whatever we can." If that phone call happens, Tommy Tuberville ain't running for governor. Because if there's one thing I know about Tommy Tuberville, is that Tommy Tuberville will run like a scalded dog from hard work. Okay. And if you doubt that, there's going to be a guy also at that commencement address that Trump has given who can attest to that, and that's Nick Saban, because Tommy Tuberville ran like a frightened child from Nick Saban, and that's exactly what's going to happen right here if that goes down. I think that's what a lot of this is about, is trying to clear out the field and talk about it over and over and over and over again about how he's running and stuff to see who he can chase away.
Okay, so you and the lieutenant governor, your boy.
That's right, man.
Y'all have a good relationship. Is he going to make that call?
I don't know. We shall see. He had the post that saying, he had his running shoes on, and was getting ready to run. He was going to go all out. I hope so. I really do. I really hope so. I think I'll say this for all the Democrats out there. Will Ainsworth is our only chance at a relatively sane 4 years or 8 years. Okay. That's it.
You mean in terms of the Republican Party? You're saying if we got to have a Republican governor, then we'd be better off with Will Ainsworth and Tuberville, or Pates.
Look, I know the rhetoric. I know some of the things. I don't like it either. I've had long arguments with Will Ainsworth about some of his beliefs and things. Okay, we've had these conversations, and we don't agree on things. But I will say there are two things about Will Ainsworth that are that make him better. And one is the fact that he is more business centric focused. Okay, that he's going to do what is best for the businesses, small businesses, the more working class person of the Republican Party. And number two, you can at least talk to Will Ainsworth. Okay, you can at least have a conversation with him about things. And if you can have a conversation with somebody, you can at least impress upon them a number of very important issues that are out there, and you can at least convince him of things that he should consider. All right, you can't do that with the other people.
So this sounds like you're making a lesser of evils argument.
I am 100. Listen, we've had this conversation a few weeks back about the Democrats' chances. There's not one. And we all know this. The party's not organized enough. There's not enough out there. I think Tommy Tuberville obviously gives Democrats the best chance at a better performance, but they're not winning. They're not winning at this point. It's just not there. Unless of course you can get a ballot challenge and sneak in that way. I just, that's my concern.
Well, I
refuse
that we get stuck to concede. I refuse to concede. I just think, I'm a Democrat. I make no secret of that. I refuse to concede. But I will say that I think when looking at the current slate of potential Republican gubernatorial nominees, pardon me, it does appear to me as though Will Ainsworth is what I would call the lesser of evils. I will go with you that far. I'm never going to say a Democrat can't win. I will absolutely concede that it's going to be extremely difficult for any Democrat to win a statewide office on, whether you're talking about the lowest statewide office or the highest statewide office in this state right now. But I'm never going to say the words, it can't be done. I just won't do it.
Well, and that's fine. That's fine. I just think that at a point we need to save ourselves and make a decision that won't cripple us for years. And I'm worried that the Tommy Tuberville one is one that could cripple us for years. That's my concern.
No doubt. Well, I don't dispute that. Yeah.
All right, let's slide out of here. We're going to come back in just a few minutes with one of two possible guests. You're gonna like either one of them. That's right.
Inside joke. Yeah.
You know what? Let's let it be a surprise for everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
A surprise for us and for y'all.
There we go.
Right. There we go. All right. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We'll be back in a minute. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we're always happy when we get folks from Southern Poverty Law Center on with us. They're great partners in this thing with us, and we really love them for what they do. And they take like us, they take a ton of crap from people who prefer to stew in ignorance because we provide them with facts and real life stuff. But this is another example of the many services SPLC provides, and that's the Whose Heritage Is It publication that they put out each year. And we are happy now to have with us Rivka Maizlish, who is
good job, Josh.
Hey, I'm out.
Good job.
I'm done. She's the senior research analyst on Whose Heritage Is It, and also a very well-known historian. And it's Rivka. Thanks for coming on and spending some time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. So this is the fourth edition of Whose Heritage Is It?
That's right.
All right. So I guess let's first tell everybody what the broad overview. What is Whose Heritage Is It?
It is a project to track and advocate for the removal of all Confederate memorials across the United States. This includes any Confederate symbol. It includes the names of schools, names of parks, names of roads, also, of course, monuments and statues.
Mm-hmm. But Rivka, these are our history.
And how else will the children learn of our history if we remove these very important lessons of our history in this way? I mean, of course, we've removed a lot of stuff from textbooks and actual curriculum, but apparently the statues with just the name emblazoned on them is a great learning tool. What is? Let me ask you this. So I know over the last year or so, we have seen a backtracking of a lot of the progress. I think, well, actually more than the last year, but really in the last year. But we've seen a lot of backtracking on the progress that had been made, specifically after the George Floyd marches and some things that were going on at that point. How troubling in your work? How troubling is that for y'all? And have you seen the list of Confederate symbols grow over the last few years, or are they still going away?
They're still going away. Progress has definitely slowed, and we are definitely concerned about the attacks on public education, trying to actually erase history. Like you said, that's the opponents of taking down Confederate symbols claim that we're trying to erase history. Actually, they are trying to erase history, and the presence of Confederate memorials across the United States at all represents a propaganda campaign that was begun after the Civil War to erase history, to erase the history of slavery, and to erase the true meaning of the Civil War as a struggle between slavery and freedom. So we certainly are concerned about this ongoing propaganda campaign that began centuries ago to rewrite history, and progress has slowed, but it hasn't stopped, and we're seeing still more coming down than going up. And, I just like to think of this movement as not just something that began in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, not just something that began in 2015 when the Southern Poverty Law Center started tracking Confederate memorials, but actually a movement that began in the 19th century when Confederate memorials started going up. And that movement had some triumphs even at the height of Jim Crow, before the Civil Rights Act, before the Voting Rights Act. They managed to block the construction of new Confederate memorials, and I believe that it will continue to have some triumphs, as it has also always had setbacks and will continue to.
It's endlessly depressing. I spent a lot of time reporting in Montgomery for a long time and in that city, and really loved a lot of the people there and a lot of the things that were going on. And and they recently renamed a bunch of their high schools. From one of the worst was Robert E. Lee High School. I mean, what always troubled me about it was this attachment that so many people had to these names, the Robert E. Lee, the Jeff Davis, those people, when those people had no attachment whatsoever to the state, to the
That's right.
city. Jefferson Davis was there for what, 6 months and
That's right.
hated every second of it.
That's right.
Robert E. Lee had no attachment to it at all. What, and this may be outside of your field of expertise. What seems to, other than just racism, because I would think a lot of the people that respond to these things would tell you, "Oh, I'm not racist. I just
That's
think
right.
heritage or whatever." What is it that seems to drive them or has them with such an attachment to these things?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in Texas and I saw the same thing. I want to be clear that Confederate symbols are always symbols of white supremacy, but not everyone who has an attachment to them is a white supremacist. They
Mhm.
just might not know the true history. And there is a real attachment. And I think that is the result of the success of this propaganda campaign that remade these symbols as American symbols. And people have been taught for so long, this is Southern heritage, this is something you can be proud of. And this propaganda campaign also erased memories and stories of true Southern heritage that I think all Americans, all Southerners, black and white, can be proud of. So, there were black and white Southern abolitionists. There
Oh,
were
yeah.
black and white Southern civil rights heroes. There were 300,000 white Southerners who fought for the Union in the Civil War. We need memorials to them. There might be a lot of Southerners who can trace their heritage back to very courageous Union soldiers who fought to preserve the Union and for freedom. So I think people
I'm
need
glad.
something else to be invested in, and that exists. There's a proud Southern heritage that isn't about white supremacy, and we need to recover that and tell those stories.
Rivka, I'm glad that you're making that point. I think that is an important distinction that needs to be, I'm going to restate it because I think it really needs to be remembered by people on all sides of this. And that is that while all Confederate monuments represent and really, I would even say, celebrate white supremacy,
Yes,
all people who embrace those monuments are not white supremacists. I think
that's right.
that's a good point to make. However, I would argue that all of those people are either willingly or unfortunately deluded and misinformed
Yes.
about what the Confederacy was. I think all the time about Alexander Stevens and his cornerstone speech.
Yes, exactly.
And I know the last time I had an exchange with some people that were speaking fondly about the Confederacy, when I brought up the cornerstone speech and quoted from it, where he says that the great truth is that the Negro is not equal to the white man, and that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. When I dropped that quote on them, the conversation ended.
That's right.
It ended because you can't argue that. This
That's
guy
right.
was the vice president of the Confederacy. So I wonder, in your efforts and in your work, would it not be beneficial to not just track and try to track the location of these various celebrations of the Confederacy? Would it not also be beneficial to try to promote the dissemination of accurate information about what the Confederacy really truly stood for?
Absolutely. I'm, as a historian, very passionate about that. And I think you're right. When people hear from the mouths of Confederate leaders themselves that the Confederacy was about slavery and white supremacy, as they stated explicitly and repeatedly before and during the Civil War, they change their tune. And studies show that people are more likely to favor the removal of Confederate symbols when they are told this true history. There's been some great work recovering dedication speeches for Confederate memorials as well. So when they put a memorial up, they usually didn't just like put it up in the dead of night. They had a big celebration ceremony and someone gave a speech. And these speeches have been preserved in old newspapers and you can find them. And, 90% of the time they talk about white supremacy. And so I think something that Southern Poverty Law Center will start to do more is to track these dedication speeches and provide that information so that people can see for themselves if they think there's a question about what this memorial is really about, or they've heard some false information that it's really just about honor or Southern heritage. They can see that someone who dedicated the memorial said it was about white supremacy. And in the Whose Heritage Report, the 4th edition, I also try to do that to provide a lot of background on the history of the Confederacy
Oh, we
from
can't hear you,
the
David.
horse's mouth, from the primary sources of the Confederates themselves.
I'm curious to know what process you all use to track the number of memorials that exist. I understand there are more than 2,000 that still exist in some form or fashion around the country. How do you locate these? What's your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. People who have been there before me did a lot of research and work in looking into this, and we do that research today. We also get a lot of information from people who live near Confederate memorials. So a lot of it is crowdsourced. Someone will write in and say, I looked up, because anyone can use our map. Someone will say, I looked up my town because there is a Confederate memorial and I didn't see it on the map. There's something wrong. And then we, verify and thank them. And it's a sort of community group effort. So.
Okay, so I would assume the same thing applies to memorials coming down, that you rely on sort of foot soldiers, I'll call them, to give you that information from various locations.
That's right. In addition to research and just Google News alerts, and keeping an eye on any memorial where there is some effort to remove it, or a community group is pushing for removal, or there's someone in a city council or a mayor or something who is interested in removal.
I got another question for you. In light of the fact that there's so much pushback, especially from the current administration, the federal national administration, the Trump administration, on the kind of efforts that you guys are promoting, and also even the very idea of pushing, they're pushing back also on the very idea of removing monuments and so forth. Do you think there's any danger of monuments that were removed being reinstalled.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this happen. The U.S. had 9 military bases named after Confederates, which is sort of remarkable that any country would have military bases named after an organization that literally made war against that country. But that just shows the success of that Confederate propaganda campaign. So there were 9 military bases named after Confederates. In 2020, Congress passed a overwhelmingly bipartisan resolution to also a revolution in Civil War memory to remove the Confederate names of those bases. They achieved it in 2023. Trump tried to veto it, but Congress overrode the veto. So this is very democratic, bipartisan. And then after taking office, Trump's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, changed 2 of those names back to their old Confederate name. So we already saw that happen, and I stress the democratic, bipartisan nature of the decision to remove the Confederate names because, of course, in contrast, Hegseth's decision was totally unilateral. No one elected him, and he just went and did this. So that is very upsetting. And then Trump passed an executive order suggesting that any names that had been changed on federal land would be changed back. The vast majority of Confederate memorials are on state and municipal property, so Trump can't legally do anything about those. But of course, it is a concern that this will sort of embolden people who do want to return names of removed Confederate memorials. And so that's why we do the work that we do to educate and push for removal.
One of the things you said, you talked about the kind of the propaganda campaign that went on. I've often wondered why there has not been an equal propaganda campaign in the other direction. And I've also, because I feel like there are a number, George Thomas, for example, a very famous Union general who was from Virginia, that really angered a bunch of the Southerners when he stuck with the Union and stayed there, crushed a lot of folks in a lot of battles, and was one of their more successful generals. And he was a Southerner, grew up on a plantation, that they had slaves on the plantation, but he still fought for the country. And so it was an example to me, because I think a lot of the cop out that you hear a lot of times is, well, they were a product of their times. They just didn't know any better. They didn't know any. Well, clearly some of them did. Clearly some of these people knew better.
300,000 white Southerners knew
Yeah.
better, fought for the Union, and that's a lot. That's almost half of
Yeah. I mean, and so I just wonder why, we hear these stories of Robert E. Lee, such a great general. First of all, not so much if you actually, followed the war.
He did lose. I mean,
Yeah, and made the stupidest decision of the entire war. Okay, there's a reason they lost. And and obviously, and some of it was the reason he was so successful was because he was up against a moron on the other side who refused to fight half the time. So but I just wonder why we haven't heard those stories. Like why did we not idolize and just romance the crap out of? I mean, and that's a historical phrase you can use. Feel free in the next edition. Romance the crap out of. Why have we not done that with some of these more heroic figures that did that? Part of the 300,000 and talk about them more. Why has that not happened?
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language. That is my passion. I do feel the romance and heroism of those stories. And I think those are beautiful stories for all Americans to celebrate because they point us in the direction that we want to go. A new birth of freedom, a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, meaning all the people, and the values of freedom and democracy. It is a tragic story of why we don't romanticize those stories, and instead we romanticize the stories of the losers who committed treason in order to defend white supremacy and slavery. Historian David Blight has an incredible book called Race and Reunion, and it's about the story of Civil War memory and the triumph of the lost cause narrative, the Confederate narrative, over the romanticization of the fight for freedom. And basically he says, that after the Civil War, white Northern liberals who might have wanted to continue the struggle for freedom that they'd fought for on the battlefield, in the realm of politics in terms of passing civil rights legislation, were fatigued and were worn down by Southern racists who wanted to block this. And Southern racists sort of promoted this myth that the North had been too aggressive towards the South before the Civil War and during the Civil War and after during Reconstruction, and that they should just back off for the good of the country and everyone should just come together and remember the Civil War as just a big misunderstanding and there was no real issue to be fighting over because anyway,
Mm.
they had this racist myth that slaves were happy and loyal,
Yeah.
so that couldn't have been the cause, and it's a tragedy because racism prevailed and this sort of myth of like, oh, let's just put all this behind us and get over it and agree to romanticize Robert E. Lee
It
and
was
move
just a tourist visit. It was just a tourist visit of the Capitol, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
there it is.
really,
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it just it drives me crazy sometimes because you'll hear these really fantastic stories that are out there of there's a Tennessean whose name is escaping me that did the same thing. Was such a heroic figure and stuff, and it's a slap in the face to those people when you
Yes.
say, oh, wow, they just didn't know any better, and I honestly I do blame to some degree the fact that the northern side of this, the Union, would not specifically come out so often and say, "This is what we're fighting for." Okay, you can't. We want to free these people, and that's it. And so they tried to hedge because they were so concerned that the racism was so prevalent, also
Right. Well,
north of the
until
Mason-Dixon
I
line.
would say until 1863, so the beginning of the war,
Yeah,
they were not fighting for freedom because Lincoln had not signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So
That's
they were
right.
fighting simply to keep the Union together. After 1863, because of pressure from abolitionists and
Hmm.
anti-slavery politicians, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And then after that, soldiers said, we're fighting for freedom.
Yeah.
This flag makes you free. And then, of course, later, Black troops were allowed to serve in the Union as well, which was a huge shift and a huge decision. So
yeah. Listen, as far as the publication goes, where can people find it, and how can they access it?
online, Southern Poverty Law Center, Whose Heritage.
Okay. All right. And now, do y'all do any sort of training or any sort of presentations that people can come to? Obviously, there's no chance you could get such a thing into public schools at this point, because God forbid, I mean, we don't want to go into Robert E. Lee High School with this sort of thing, but are there any other let's say some parents out wanted to take their kids or take themselves to such a thing or learn more about this? What do y'all offer any of those sort of things?
Yeah, we're working on teaming up with our state offices who work with like community groups to do webinars with educators. I would love to work with students, parents. We really do want to like get into the communities and share this. It's not just we publish it one time, we put it on the internet, we
Sure.
hope people click on it. But yeah, absolutely working with. I've talked to college students, which I love doing, and yeah, we really want to make this a community-based thing. So I can certainly let you know if we have any, coming up in Alabama, and you can let people know how to join.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Please do let us know.
and let me just say, as the resident black guy on this podcast, the only black guy on this podcast, I want to thank you and the Southern Poverty Law Center for attacking this issue in particular. I mean, Southern Poverty Law Center does great work, across the spectrum of social justice, but this in particular, because it goes in my mind, it goes to the heart of what was the impetus for slavery and then its successor, Jim Crow,
Right.
in this country. And this question of heritage has been one of the last bastions of the neo-Confederates and many conservatives, right-wing extreme conservatives, when it comes to race in this country and social justice in this country. So I want to thank you for this, because I see this as you're fighting on behalf of not just what is true and what is accurate, but you're also fighting on behalf of what is right and what is the original, and I would argue mortal sin of our nation, which is this whole question of, white supremacy masquerading as heritage.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's, yeah, well said. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And again, as a Texan, I also feel this desire to say, we can reject this heritage of white supremacy and slavery and Jim Crow, and we can turn to these true stories of resistance and struggle for justice and democracy that are there if we look for them.
Well, as the token white guy here, I would just say, keep this up, because a lot of my people need the education. Okay, we could certainly use it. And honestly, thank you for what you do. Thank you for spending some time with us, Rivka. Keep it up. And if we can help in any way, always reach out, and we'll pass along the information to whoever we can get it to. Okay.
Thank you. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And thank you for your work. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. That is Rivka Maizlish. Maizlish. Yes, I got it twice. All right. We'll be back in a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a second. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Our thanks to for joining us this week, and a little something for the folks to clean up there. And our folks, thanks to our fine sponsors, SPLC, and of course, Wind Creek Entertainment, those folks with the Porch Creeks, and really appreciate everything they've done. We really probably need to get them on and kind of do a cleanup of the session. Just talk about what happened with the possibilities of gaming bills, and also their purchase
That's a great
of the
idea.
Birmingham race course. And so I'll reach out to Arthur Mothershed and see if he has some time here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get him to come in and we can talk for a little bit. That should be nice. All right, we're gonna we're running a little long, so we're gonna slide out real quick. We're gonna jump right to the right wing nut here, and our right wing nut is Lindsey Graham. The good Senator Lindsey, which you really used to make me laugh so much when Jon Stewart would do his impression of Lindsey Graham, and I do declare, it's giving me the vapors. Where's my fainting couch? Oh my! Lindsey had himself a nice tweet on Tuesday, in which he said, "I was excited to hear that President Trump is open to the idea of being the next pope. This would truly be a dark horse candidate, but I would ask the papal conclave and the Catholic faithful to keep an open mind about this possibility. The first pope/U.S. president combination has many upsides. Watching for white smoke." Look, Lindsey came out later, said, he was obviously joking about this, and maybe so. Maybe there was some tongue in cheek to this whole thing or whatever. But I mean, it just is this another step in this stupid kowtowing to Donald Trump nonsense, and it just to watch. There was a quote from Murkowski the other day, and when she talked about. She was intimidated. They were so intimidated, and they were scared of retribution. Of what? Are you gonna die? I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, it's just.
Well, I think what she was talking about was not just political. I do think that there's some very real fears out there that Trump has the ability to instigate the kind of just sort of visceral, or not visceral, but the kind of venal reaction from some of his supporters that could get people killed. I think she may not have said that, but I think that was implied or could be inferred from what she was saying. So yeah, I think that's a real concern some people have.
Listen, I don't doubt that, and and rightfully so. I mean, we saw what they did to the Capitol. Although, I mean, it was a tourist visit, and they are now complicit in a lot of these people being released because they downplayed this thing to such a degree that now we were able to vote back in the coup leader into office, and so I mean, but a lot of these people didn't speak up enough. They didn't go along with the we should have had a trial for this man. We should have had a trial for this man, and we should have treated him the way some of these other folks, what isn't his good buddy, is it Victor Orban? Wasn't he just pushed out and ruled he can't run? Or it was in France, right? The right winger in France.
Mercan, was it Mercan? Not
No,
Mercan.
no. You're talking about Macron. I'm talking about the far right wing people that were there, and one of their candidates was pushed out, and it just is, it's sad that we've allowed this to happen. Okay, it's sad that we've allowed that they didn't take a stand early, and you brought up before we came on people like Ted Cruz, and I don't know how anybody in the world votes for Ted Cruz. I really don't. You can look. I mean, man, when a person's own daughter clearly does not respect him, and she does it. She clearly does not respect what he's doing out there with the way that she continually undermines him. And look, rightfully so. Rightfully so. This dude took a shot at her mother, at Ted Cruz's wife. I mean, then talked about his father. You basically turned his father into an assassin.
That's right.
And now he's out here running. I saw a clip the other day of him talking about how Trump has been, there have been so many nationwide injunctions against this one president, as though it was proof that, they were mistreating Trump in some way, and not the fact that Trump has been a complete and utter dipshit while in office and doing things that are blatantly illegal. And I said to somebody, I said, look, if he made the case that, okay, we haven't had many under Biden and Obama, well, he would probably sway a lot of people, with that sort of thing. But he also included in there George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush. And I'm like, dude, if that's your argument, maybe these people weren't criming quite like the current guy's criming, and I don't know.
It's really frightening to see grown men basically kiss the feet of another man who has disrespected them or who has done such despicable things. And they're supposed to be, you would think that a man who's a grown man would stand up for what he believes in. But Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, I'm looking at a story here now about how even Ted Cruz's daughter's not just mad at her dad, she's not completely happy with her mom. Because even her mom, I guess, has decided to at times be supportive of what of Ted Cruz and his efforts to genuflect in front of Trump. Apparently they were at some event about a year ago, or last year anyway, when Cruz was praying for a Trump win, and his wife was clapping and applauding the prayer. And you think, really? After he talks about you like that, that's what you, and never apologizes.
And the daughter stopped her, said, don't clap for that.
I mean, so, the daughter has courage. The daughter has more courage than her own father, perhaps her own mother, definitely more than Lindsey Graham. I mean, that's such a... To say that Donald Trump, who's not even Catholic, and I'm not even sure he's religious at all, to say that he could be the next pope, and to think that's some kind of a smart, pithy kind of joke to make, that just tells you how deep in the tank he is for this guy.
Yeah, it's
scary.
I mean, honestly, it is. It is. It's honest. It's depressing, man. It really is depressing sometimes to watch these people just. I mean, there's a great. I'm a big stand-up comedy guy. All right, I watch a ton of different people out there and love a lot of it. And there's a bit by, I believe it's Bo Burnham, and actually I don't even think it's a bit. I think he's somewhere and he's being interviewed, and so I've just seen the clip of it, and he said, the one thing I'll never get over is we're talking about Donald Trump, and he says Donald Trump, and they start to move on with the interview, and he's like, no, listen, We're talking about Donald Trump. Donald
Right.
Trump is doing this. This is
Yeah.
Donald Trump. You know, he's like, that's the
Mhm.
one thing I'll never get past is that all of these people are becoming subservient and cowering and talking, you know, about how wonderful Donald Trump is. You know, it was. I just, it's like, I know that people can't remember past 6 months ago. Okay, in everything that we do, but I mean, so 10 years ago is like another lifetime. But I wish I could describe to people what a laughing stock this man was 10 years ago. That the idea of this candidate, all the same shit that he's saying now and doing now, people were like, "Get the fuck out of here! What are you kidding? No way!" You know.
Well, Lindsey Graham was one of his biggest critics back
Yes.
in that time.
All of these big
And
Ted
that's-
Cruz
and Ted Cruz was too,
Marco
yeah.
Rubio. I mean,
Yeah,
Marco Rubio
they-
talked about
they
how he
all-
was going to be the next Hitler. You know,
Mhm,
and it just,
mhm.
I mean, and that was but even some of those things came after people started taking him more seriously. I mean, the general public thought this guy was a fruitcake, a sideshow carnival barker. And the only reason he got into this was because everybody thought he was such a freak show that the cable news people just kept showing him all the time because it was something for people to laugh at and poke fun of. And then all of a sudden, everybody forgot the joke. I mean, kind of like how now we believe Archie Bunker was the good guy, you know, and it's just, I mean, honestly, it's just the absurdity of the whole thing is so off the charts. And then to watch people cowering to did you see the ABC interview with Terry Moran where Moran's trying to was talking to him about the Abreu Garcia, and he says Trump, he's got MS-13 tattooed on his fingers, and Moran was like, well, he's got symbols that could be interpreted that way. He's like, no, Terry, it says MS-13. This stupid motherfucker actually thinks that the dude went and got an Arial font MS-13 on his fingers and it wasn't photoshopped. And Moran's like, no, dude, that was photoshopped on there. He's like, oh no, Terry, it was not photoshopped. I mean,
Well,
it was
it's
absurdity.
it's not the first time that he's just blatantly made stuff up. You know, we all remember the marker incident where he was trying to to convince the nation
Sharpie
by using a Sharpie
God.
that that the weather
They
was
didn't-
doing something that
all
it
of
wasn't doing.
And
You
all
know,
of
I mean,
that
it's-
was about,
it's
so he
childish.
didn't have to
It's
admit he
just
made a
childish.
mistake when talking.
Right.
All of that
It's
was
just childish.
He had included Alabama in the hurricane path, and people were like, "Oh,
Right.
Alabama's not in the path," and yes, it was, and he just drew an
Yeah.
extra thing with a Sharpie. It was just so yeah, you're right. It's that way.
And this is the pattern that we have seen, over really going back, really and truly going back to the whole Obama birth certificate thing. He knew that was never true. There was never any evidence to support that. And he knew that. But he just kept telling the lie. And it's probably something he's been doing since childhood because it's a very childish kind of behavior.
Yeah. That's a good example of, or it's a good explanation of exactly who we have: an overgrown orange child. All right, let's get out of here. We'll be back next week and the week after, and several weeks after that, until we take our summer break. And so until then, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.